And so therefore geology was not possible to them. Not because they were dumb, because look at the buildings they built, right? Not because they were imbecilic, but because the glasses they wore that described the world for them were wrong. They had the wrong faith, therefore there were certain facts they could not make use at all. Why not? Because fact and faith have to go hand in hand. You want to make use of the facts? You have to have the right faith. So don't be surprised, it's not until the Middle Ages, and just after that. You've heard of Martin Luther?
Oh, of course, yes.
I know you've got a degree in theology, so tell me, what do you know about Martin Luther?
I know about him that as he studied his Bible, finally, he realized what really salvation is and who's the provider.
So he had
of
been a
salvation.
university student?
Yes, he was, yes.
How did he earn his money to pay his way through?
Wasn't he a monk?
Well, yes, he was a monk as well, but that's only part of it. But you see, his father and he had been involved in all sorts of financial schemes, including being dealers in coal.
Yes,
You've heard of coal?
Yes,
right?
yes, I did.
Okay, and coal is full of plant remains. So don't be surprised when Martin Luther finally wrote a commentary on Genesis, you begin to find reference to fossils. How do you get coal, by the way?
Well, you just dig it out.
Dig a hole, fossil.
Exactly.
Okay?
Oh, yeah,
Catching on?
Good.
Okay. These words are really important. So they dug up the coal, and in it they found plants. Whereupon they have a new question. You see, how many gods did Martin Luther have?
Just one. That's for
one.
sure.
Okay. Did this God play tricks?
No, at all.
Did this God make the earth?
Yes, he did.
And Martin Luther is famous for knowing his Bible, correct?
Oh, yes.
In fact, the book that he loved most was Romans, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, read me Romans chapter 1, verse 20.
For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse.
So the God who made the world, you can see the evidence of his nature in the things that he created.
Exactly.
Isn't that what it said?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so if this God could be trusted, then what do you know about the rocks? Were they there to play tricks on you?
No, they're not.
So if God could be trusted, the rocks could be trusted.
Yes.
Now, you're Joe the Christian fisherman.
Wow.
Good.
Did I evolve or just I change?
You were converted.
Oh, thank you very much.
And so you wander down to the beach, you pick up a rock, and you split it. And in it, you see what looks like a preserved herring.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is a herring.
Okay.
And because you've broken open the rock, it's a fossil, you know that. But you see, you've now got a different set of glasses than the ancient Greek man.
Yes.
And here's what goes through your mind. Fishes don't live in rocks.
No, they don't.
I'm not stupid.
No, I'm not.
Fishes live in the sea.
Exactly.
Question. How did it get from the sea to the rock? And all of a sudden, geology is possible. Not because you're any smarter, but because you've taken off the wrong faith glasses and you put the right faith ones on.
Good.
So therefore, don't be surprised if you begin to dig into geology that you find Nicholas Steno was a bishop. If it looks like a shark's tooth, it's probably a shark's tooth. What a revelation! So obvious. But you see, you can only reach that conclusion if you believe that what you see can be trusted. And a Hindu doesn't. And a Buddhist doesn't. I mean, if you think that cow over there was great-grandmother recycled 13 times, you will never do geology.
That's environmental grandmother.
That's
to make it clear.
So therefore you need to come to grips with the fact that geology is really an outgrowth from an initial Christian perspective, a faith-based science that deals with facts. So you go to England, you dig out the oldest collection of fossils in the English-speaking world, you dig out the oldest book written on fossils by Professor John Woodward, and you discover it starts with creation, and it moves through to Noah's flood. Why were they doing that? Okay, let's see if you can figure it out. I told you that was a fossil of what?
Of a herring.
Okay, can the viewers see it clearly the way you're holding it there?
Yes, I can.
They can, that's very good. Okay, now look, when you have a look at that herring,
Yes.
by the way, how do you think I know that's a herring?
Have you ever seen herrings before?
Yes.
Hmm.
Okay, now, question. If you're trying to look for the evidence of evolution, is that herring any help to you?
Ooh, not exactly.
You see, the interesting thing about that verse in the book of Romans is that the God who created, his nature shows in the creation. Okay, so therefore, if you're looking for the evidence of creation, number one, you would see what he is like in his creation. Question, does he ever change?
No.
Now go back to Genesis chapter 1 and read us verse 11, please. You see, these are all the thoughts that went through the first geologist's minds.
Okay.
So anyone who thinks today that faith and fact are separate or in conflict really has been lied to. They've been fed a false proposition and they don't know it. They've been given a set of glasses to wear and nobody's told them.
Okay, the listeners, viewers, Genesis 1 verse 11, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is it in itself upon the earth, and so it was.
Question.
Yes?
How did Steno reach the conclusion that was a shark's tooth? And how do we know that's a fossil herring? And what's it got to do with Genesis 1? And how would you invent geology on that basis? I mean, think carefully. You've already answered this question in another way. And I'm making you do it because the listeners out there have never been asked these questions. Read the verse again to everybody.
Here is it. I got
the
key.
penny drops.
Yes, bing. Let me read, am I correct? After his kind.
Good.
Okay.
And you see, Steno put 2 and 2 together and got 4. Sharks today have teeth that look like this.
Yeah.
These may be bigger, they may be longer or thinner or fatter or wider or broader, but basically they look like shark's teeth.
Shark's teeth.
And if it is true that God created and God doesn't change, and if it is true that God created creatures to produce their own kind, how would you recognize a fossil shark?
Well, I see sharks today, and knowing that sharks have been always, they've been always sharks.
What would they look like?
Like sharks.
Good. Are you a trained geologist as well now? But you're doing well,
I won't tell you.
This is the thinking that the geologists had to go through. So what about our fossil herring? How do we know it's a fossil herring?
Well, we've seen a lot of fish, so we know this is a fish too. So
good. What about our trilobite? Because we haven't seen one of those.
Trilobite. Well, I just demolished my own little theory.
Well, you haven't really. All you've done is reached a new category of creatures, because this one is extinct. He's died out. He obviously used to be, because he looks like he's got eyes at the front end and a cute little mouth, and he's got, you know, he just looks like a bug on the bottom of the seafloor. But he's not here anymore. There are some creatures a bit like him, so you think maybe he's in that family, and you're pretty right when it turns out to it. So therefore you have 2 categories of creatures, those that have died out and those that are still here. Which brings us up to another aspect of science which people are deceived about. Have you heard of Charles Darwin?
Oh, yes, I did.
What's he famous for?
For his theory of evolution.
Okay, he wrote a book in 1859. Do you remember the name of it in English?
On the origin of species?
Origin of species, okay. And Charles Darwin's theory ultimately is that molecules that weren't alive somehow turned into cells that were alive, that turned into worms, some of which became politicians, some of which became, you know, got the idea, right? So that's the theory of evolution. But he called it the origin of the
species.
And never once does he tell people where he gets that word from. You see, the interesting thing is the man who gave us our classification system, Carl von Linné, and you don't find this out in the textbooks. You have to sort of do what I did, leave university, and then say, where did Linnaeus get this idea from? And what you discover, he was basically an evangelical Lutheran. And he believed his Bible, and he believed that if God created creatures separately,